Hello, everyone, and welcome to Vaccines for All. Today, we are delighted to have Governor Guerrero from Guam. I'm Ramesh Raskar from MIT Media Lab, and we're going to talk about the vaccination strategies in Guam, as well as the governor's personal experience from her personal life dealing with health and economy. So welcome, first of all, Governor.
Thank you, Dr. Ramesh, for this opportunity to address, of course, your participants.
Great. So the conference theme is empowering citizens, vaccines for all. Let's start with how you're thinking about the pandemic in Guam. What has been some success stories, some learnings, and how you're thinking about vaccination?
Yes. So ever since December of last year, our public health had actually alerted me that they're seeing something in China. And so we've been monitoring it since then. And we got our most tragic news, in my mind, on March 14th, when we had 3 of our islanders tested positive for coronavirus. And at that point, then, because of our island being small, our healthcare system being only one hospital with, several clinics, one public hospital and one private hospital, and our resources are not very vast, we were also concerned about overwhelming our hospital. And so immediately, our disaster planning team advised me that I should do a stay at home and close all non-essential businesses, tell people to stay home, wear masks. And so from the very beginning, Dr. Ramesh, we have put in, I think, very effective public health preventive efforts. And our people were very cooperative. And in a matter, we were able to contain the virus. And of course, we weren't testing as much as we are now because of the limited capacity of testing, but CDC was giving us test kits. And I remember when we were inventorying it at 400 test kits. And now, of course, we have more than that. But it was also a limited capacity to test. We contact traced, and we did everything that we agreed with in the guidelines. And for several months, we contained our virus. And what we did was we also created a plan to recover. And we used the think tank from, I think it was RAND Corporation. I can't remember. But we used their think tank guidelines. And we also looked at what the White House had put out, and we incorporated them. And what we did was we would lift restrictions very slowly, and then we would monitor our data for 2 weeks, and then we would lift again another set of restrictions, and we would monitor. And we did that along the way, and we were actually in PCOR 3 ready to declare it contained. And we only had 217 positive cases at the time. We only had 7 deaths, although 7 too many. But we did have a containment situation. And then one individual who had come from off island at that time, also the United States was raging with increased positive cases and increased deaths. And so we had identified the United States as a hot spot. And so what we were doing was people that came from the United States, we would quarantine them. And allow also self-quarantining if appropriate based on our guidelines. And we had a one non-compliant self-quarantine individual that went to a congregation. It was a funeral and people weren't wearing masks, and he was positive from the mainland, and there was the very super community spreader. And in August, we started seeing increase in the last few weeks of July. In August, we soared up to 100 positives a day. And then we instituted again. We went back from the very beginning since August 14th. And now that is the journey we're still in. But now we are, we've had clusters of 400, 500, but they were controlled clusters. So I was concerned about that being spread into the community, but it was very controlled. And so now we're seeing CAR scores that went from 47 to now we are at 1.6. And I feel, again, are on the way to opening up some more restrictions, but not quickly, gradually, and monitoring it again for any changes in data. And of course, following science very well.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, clearly the island has gone through difficult times, but you seem to be using, on the ground resources as well as technology for many of these. Our team at MIT and also the PathCheck Foundation, which is a spin-off from MIT, has been working with you. Can you share a little bit about how you think about data and technology and your work at MIT?
Technology is very important because it provides me with quick data and quick information to make very important and very life-saving decisions. And so I wanted to say too that during the first wave surge between March and July, we had already been introduced to PathCheck through MIT. And I think we started much more aggressively using it in August and September, October, and of course, you see the results in the last 3 months. But that, along with other apps that we were using, helped us with monitoring, helped us actually, the community was a big help, because the way the Guam COVID alert works is that it will alert you if you've been exposed to a positive person. And then, of course, the individual that's been exposed to the positive person and alerted through this COVID alert would then be the responsible person to test, to inform public health. And I think that's where you start seeing your individual empowerment and individual responsibilities, individual accountability. And that, I think, is growing. It's growing, but it needs to be messaged out more in that sense.
Yeah, I think last time your team shared, I think you had about 30 to 35% adoption. And once that reaches 60, 70%, it could make a big dent, not just for exposure notification, but also as a messaging platform with the residents.
Right. And I just wanted to thank your team, and also, MIT and PathCheck for helping us, and for introducing this to us, and for tweaking it with us, and for helping us to improve in the areas of weakness so that people would have more credibility in the alert system. And I think it's taking off. I think it has been slow, but as people become more confident and as credibility is experienced, I think this is a good technology to help contain and also help isolate and help slow the spread of coronavirus in, in the community.
And I still remember conversations with Dr. Thane Hancock and Ms. Munoz from Guam, your team, working very closely with MIT, with PathCheck, and being kind of the earliest adopters of innovation. So I think the culture of innovation is apparently very strong, looks like it's very strong in Guam and also in your team.
We are, I think we are pretty innovative. We're also pretty creative. We're flexible, and we're able to adjust as the circumstances call for. And which is very much, I think, important in dealing with this coronavirus, because we all know from the very beginning, we didn't know much. We know now more than we did in January, February, and March. And so we were able then to adjust our protocols, to adjust our policies accordingly. And of course, with the help of technology and data, that just makes it a lot more confident to do it, because you have documentation and justification and data and information, which is important. You're not just making decisions by, up in the air. Oh, today I think I'll figure out and quarantine the senior citizens. No, you don't do that. You use your data and information for decisions and actions, not just decisions, but also actions.
Absolutely. And Governor, I mean, in your personal life, you have, a graduate degree in healthcare, you have an illustrious career in finance, in a leadership role. Tell us a little bit more about kind of your journey and how that also prepares you for this kind of innovation going forward.
Absolutely. So as I had stated earlier, my first career was nursing. And actually, I still hold my nursing license active, both from California and from Guam. So that really helps. Also coming from a healthcare background, I also got my master's in public health from UCLA. So I very much, I'm not unfamiliar at all with public health events. I'm not unfamiliar with public health decisions and actions. And so I feel very comfortable working with public health. I feel very comfortable with the knowledge and information that public health gives. And, I didn't have to go through a learning curve. And also very comfortable with numbers and finance. And so, when you look at our economy, I'll just have to say this to Dr. Ramesh, that the federal assistance has been a great help for our island. They have pumped in over $1.3 billion in aid in every aspects, in lending, in small businesses, in individual help, in unemployment, standing up unemployment, Medicare, Medicaid, access to healthcare, testing, ability to provide tests to our community without having to charge. That's been my one pet peeve, is if you start charging for these tests, it's a deterrent for people. And I do not want to have any kind of deterrent or any kind of obstacles to access for that testing, because that's very crucial. It's very crucial. And so all that combined, I think makes me feel a lot more equipped and a lot more knowledgeable in actions and decisions to make. Of course, the economy is also just as important as the health of our people, but I have to say in my persuasion with the businesses to just be a little bit patient and to help and support me in trying to keep our people healthy, is that a healthy community, a healthy person makes for a healthy economy. So we can't really grow and build and rebuild and nurse back our economy without having a healthy community first. So in those very competing interests, I think the health of our people is more compelling and much more the higher focus. And then, of course, our economy. And we're at the stage now where we are, working with trying to get back our economy on its feet. And again, just understanding our economy here. We are actually supported by tourism primarily, but also government spending is a big source of revenues here in Guam, both from the military and the local spending. And so in the consideration of the economy, you cannot take that part out. And people were actually, I think, amazed that when they say to me, Governor, how come you're not furloughing government employees? How come, I said, because I don't have to. Right now, we are able to continue employing our people. And my biggest comeback to that is my goal is to keep people employed. My goal is not to decrease employment. My goal is to keep people employed, both in the public and the private sector. And that's why we worked very hard with our federal partners to make sure our financial assistance is there. So when you talk about economy, it has so many different elements and so many moving parts. But being in the financial, in the banking industry, my experience there has made me very confident in dealing and making, I think, the right decisions when we move forward with our economic growth, and also recognizing the importance of our economy and providing the means to help put back our people to work, and also understand that all of these financial aid and assistance is very temporary, and that our goal is to make sure we come in with some very hard, permanent plans to grow our economy back again, to get tourism back again. And we've been doing that. GVB, our Guam Visitors Bureau, has been in communication with Asian countries because that's where our source of market is for tourism. And as you know, the Asian, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, those are our main tourists. They're doing really good in containing their virus and their cases. So once we also are able to feel very confident that we are, of course, the vaccine's going to come in, and that's that's the one of the resolutions and resolving of our coronavirus spread and pandemic here.
I mean, what I really hear in your voice, Governor, is this. Maybe it's because of your nursing experience. Is this very human-centric aspect of it, whether it's safety of an individual, the cost, their income. So I hear a lot of in your voice about this very kind of human-centric, resident-centric thinking of it, how it impacts an individual. So on that note, I mean, the theme for this conference is also about vaccines for all, empowering individuals for vaccination. So in addition to making sure our public health systems, are data-centric and technology-driven, that the solutions available for individuals are also very innovative, and we just don't give them a piece of paper and hope they just, take care of themselves. So, what's your thinking on that? How are you thinking about, given the kind of your own background, given how Guam is innovative, what's your thinking on how can we empower individuals in Guam for the current phase as well as for vaccination?
Yeah. For me, knowledge is a very forceful, empowering tool. And so the more you educate the community, the more you inform them, the more you bring them along the process that you're going through, they become more knowledgeable. And then they have then the choice to make their decision on what actions to take. So with the vaccination, I just got off a meeting, and I was very adamant that people be educated about everything, the details. You know, is the vaccine safe? Is it effective? And I know that people are already being educated with that, you know, through technology, right? Social media, you know, and so forth. So technology empowers people in that sense, where they can be the tool that feeds out and distributes the information and the knowledge and whatever they need to be informed on. So to me, empowering somebody relies on how you are educating them. And so, just for example, with this vaccine, I asked my communications and public health to be very in sync with even how you train the nurses to to administer the vaccine. How do you reconstitute the vaccine? You know, what is the storage of the vaccine? When is the vaccine coming? What is the shelf life of the vaccine? You know, details like that just gives the people the confidence and to make those decisions and to choose to be vaccinated. And because that's another challenge, is how do you persuade them to take the vaccine? Because it's a voluntary situation. And the more we vaccinate people, I think the faster we'll be on our way to returning to some kind of normalcy in our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, if you listen to Dr. Anthony Fauci from NIH and others, they constantly remind us that it's not just the macro planning of, you know, manufacturing, distribution, and messaging, but also the micro planning. You know, whether it's indicating eligibility. Are you in tier 1 or tier 2 or tier 3 in terms of prioritization? Are you, you know, how do you coordinate the second dose and make sure people are taking the same kind of a second dose, not confusing between different types of vaccines? Or, you know, how do you get people a piece of paper or some kind of an app that allows them to show it so they can go back to school or get on a, you know, go to a venue or a concert? You know, how do you allow people to report any symptoms or adverse reactions, you know, so that they're not scared of law enforcement, but they can still do that. And as I said, very targeted messaging, and the messaging can be different because of language or age group or education and so on. That's very targeted. It's not one size fits all. So a lot of these conference conversations are about what we can do to give tools to individuals so that they can be empowered in all these issues of you know, kind of the micro planning aspect of it. How's your team thinking about some of these challenges?
You know, again, like I said, greater communication with people, providing the resources to our people, providing the technology for our people to, again, empower themselves, and saying to them, we trust you. We trust that you will cooperate. We trust that you will choose to be responsible. And in anything actually that we do, not just with the vaccine, but even the whole persuasion of wearing masks and adjusting to that. So it's giving them the resources in every possible way that we can, access to technology, access to information, you know, access to resources, access to training, even access to financial help and access to financial assistance, making them trust in your government, and that the government is here to protect you, and the government is here to provide the services so your quality of life can continue on, so that you can provide for your family. All that, I think, is very crucial in the whole theme of empowering the individuals. And of course, vaccines for all will be a success if we do empower people.
And unfortunately,
they feel that they're in control, right? They feel that they're in control. They're making the decisions, and they are.
And vaccines for all, but I think in the beginning it's going to be vaccines for a few. I realized that Guam is going to get less than 5,000 doses in the beginning. So how are you thinking about making sure the rest of the population is not anxious, or they understand when the turn comes? Or this is the micro planning of who exactly gets vaccination, because even in a hospital, it's not clear who should get that.
Yeah.
I know these are early days, but can you share with us how you're thinking about it?
Right. So we've had planning meetings. Oh, a lot of planning meetings. We have a committee just for prioritization using the CDC guidelines. And, also just the committee for, like I said, the training, the education, and the messaging, and so forth. So we are getting, and also being in close communication with our federal partners, CDC, HHS, and they've been very responsive, and they've been working very closely with us. Just a few days ago, we had a whole tabletop kind of regional meeting just for the area of distribution, allocation, administering, and so forth, right? What are your best practices? What are you doing to make sure that it gets out? And what is your network of feeders to bring out the vaccine? So all of that we've been doing, and we've been preparing, and I think we need to do more in messaging that out to our people. As far as the vaccine, we are getting, there's sort of some miscommunications. Some people say we're getting it monthly. Some people say we're getting it weekly, but it's going to be clarified. And I think initially my understanding is we will be getting, I think around 11,000 vaccine from Pfizer and from Moderna in the beginning. But with Pfizer, we'll only probably be getting like 7,000 something, which is you split it into 2 doses, right? So it would be about 3,500 people that would be vaccinated in the very beginning.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. This rationing, I could imagine, could add a lot of stress to individuals and especially businesses. So, the plans for phase 2 are unclear, even from a CDC's point of view. Kind of right. One suggestion through software like Tiberius or WAMS is that large employers will upload a list of all their employees so that they could get an email alert. But of course, that seems like it gets into kind of a big brother kind of system where every employer has to reveal email addresses of all of their employees and so on. And I know, again, these are early days. Are you getting any feedback from your, especially large employers in the tourism industry or service industry? Because I could imagine, a very innovative place like Guam could create kind of a reverse system saying, here is, X thousand coupons for your businesses, and we empower the businesses to decide who of their employees could be first in the line. Or do you expect the government to be in charge of deciding which person gets high priority?
I think there's the expectation that the government would be because of, just the prioritization and also messaging from the CDC. Excuse me.
Yeah. I would imagine that works for like healthcare workers or, frontline workers or police and so on. But once we go to the service employees, I wonder if there's a friction. Some of them could be foreign employees. Some of them may not want to be, revealed to, a big government database and so on. And there's just a headline in New York Times that said a lot of states are pushing back. I know Minnesota and North Carolina and some other states have decided not to reveal all the personally identifiable information to the central government, to the federal government. I'm just wondering if there is any pushback from the business.
No, I haven't heard any yet. I'm not saying that I won't be hearing it, but I haven't heard anything yet. I think the community is looking at the government to be the one to organize that. And we are. And we are also, involving as many people as we can in the whole prioritization of the vaccine. But you're right, we're just looking at phase 1. There hasn't been much discussion for phase 2. But I think once it starts getting out into the community, there will be some jockeying of who should be getting the vaccine.
Yeah.
And, I'm looking to public health to provide that guidance.
Yeah. Yeah. But this is one of those difficult scenario where, we're literally talking about people's lives, and, it'll be difficult for any individual to start making those decisions, or, who gets the protection and who doesn't. So on that note, how's your relationship? You're in a very unique situation of one of the most innovative, an island territory. Guam was the first one to launch, an exposure notification app, first amongst all the U.S. territories, and I think roughly the first 5 in the U.S., which is very commendable. And do you think when it comes to either apps for vaccination or some kind of a data or technology for vaccination, I would imagine, again, Guam will be a leader in the region, but also probably amongst the first in the US.
Yes, actually, we are talking to PathCheck already to help us out with this whole vaccination administration expansion of that, which, it would help with the tracking, and it would complement and enhance our system of tracking. So right along with that, I think is, again, cannot overemphasize the importance of technology in helping push this out. And we are first in those areas that you had mentioned, because I think because we are a small island and we are only 166,000 people, it's easier to do things more quickly than, say, just Los Angeles City alone, or even a little town in Los Angeles. So that's I think a benefit and a strength for us. But yeah, we're going to be working very closely with those partners.
I mean, given your personal background in healthcare and finance, I would imagine Guam could become with your leadership, basically an innovation hub to make sure, not just for this pandemic, for future pandemic, Guam could become kind of the earliest adopters and can do small experiments, as I said, because it's limited population, with a population that's very business friendly and innovation friendly. Do you see that ethos? I mean, I've seen that so far interacting with a lot of people from your team and your organizations. Do you think that ethos will continue?
Yes, absolutely. I believe so. I think this isn't going to be our first pandemic that we will be experiencing, but there's a lot that have been learned from this pandemic, and it will be used again in any kind of future pandemics. But yeah, that's the kind of values I think that we will be looking at in coming. And it's not just like you said in the pandemic. It's also, I think, a good investment opportunities for here in our island. You know, we would love to be the data center of the Asian Pacific region. We have, you know, several cable lines coming in from the U.S., from Asia, and so forth. And we continue. We are already working with carriers, telecommunications carriers, to improve that, enhance that, grow that, expand it, and we can be the redundancy for communication from Southeast Asia over to northern North Atlantic.
Fantastic,
That
fantastic.
can be us.
And it's really, really, really amazing to hear about how you're thinking about the future of this crisis. And as you said, you know, it could cost $1 billion plus if you're not prepared again the next time. But you know, just a fraction of that investment could keep us prepared in that sense. So, kind of on a final note, as I said, this conference is really about innovators and researchers and scientists and a lot of stakeholders thinking about how do we empower the individuals for pandemic response and pandemic preparedness. Just your closing thoughts on how Guam can be a guiding light, or how you would like to invite some of the innovators here to work with you.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. We are inviting innovators. We are inviting investors. First, I think where we are geographically located, we are sort of the bridge between, like I said, Asia and Pacific and the Northern Atlantic, and we are right there geographically positioned to provide that kind of opportunity. We also, I think what's also good is we work under the United States laws. Our standards of practice are very much guided by those of the United States. So for investors in areas of good government laws, good laws, and also in the area of processes and systems, we certainly are right up there in terms of being innovative and to provide policies that would help with the investors. Technology, we are very technically, our infrastructure is very, I think, strong. It can be stronger, but we have the infrastructure here to even promote more of those kinds of investments. And again, you know, our opportunities with our people are there. We have a higher institution of learning that we can provide more high professional resources to provide that with the technology that's needed. And so we are the place. I think we are small. We react, I feel, very quickly. Decisions are made very quickly. Actions are taken. Do we have bureaucracy of government? Yes. And that's frustrating for me coming from the private sector, but certainly we are working at improving our processes in government. We agree, we are supportive of regulations and we are supportive of rules, but we are also want to be as less bureaucratic as possible so things can even go faster. So we are smart people here in Guam. We are experienced. We are very multicultural, multi-diverse, and we welcome all kinds of cultural innovations, investments, diverse investments in the area of technology, agriculture, aquaculture, trade, commerce, transportation, we are able to provide those opportunities for the investors.
That's fantastic. I mean, I have experienced, the nimble innovation and the passion to make things happen firsthand with your team, working on the exposure notification apps, and hope our team and innovators for this conference will find other ways to interact with you. And often, Estonia is compared in Europe as one of the smaller countries that's able to move very fast and show innovations in digital systems. And I never want to compare one with another, but I hope that Guam will be another one of those very nimble, fast-moving players, especially for this pandemic and over time for public health. So, Governor, if you can just stay on for a couple of minutes, I'm going to end this session by thanking our listeners and thanking you for joining this team. Thank you.
Thank you.